What's going on, everybody? Positional previews wrapping up. We finally get to the defensive backs, the secondary, which added a ton of talent this year. Is it going to be enough to make up for all the losses? We talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Thank you for making Locked On Badgers your first listen. We are here to cover your team every single day. Glad to do it. We're excited. Football season's here. We're wrapping up positional previews. Really do appreciate everybody who's taking this journey with us, joining up in the community. We got Justin Jolka, a longtime friend of the show, joining up. We're talking DB previews. Listen, I had you on for the quarterback previews. I am happy to have you on for what is a more exciting, a more robust position to talk about with the DBs, and we're here for it, man. So, how are you doing, Justin?
I'm gonna throw this in here real quick. You guys completely missed out on me talking to Ryan about the whole Wolf situation. It was a great conversation.
It was 20 minutes of Justin telling me how bad our quarterback room is. But we're here for DBs, right? And I want to start here with DBs, right? Because so anyone who watched my kind of Chase Wolf / depth chart reaction show knows I said that the staff bungled the transfer portal with quarterbacks. They needed to bring someone in this offseason. They didn't. However, on the defensive backside, here's the inverse of that.
Yeah.
Right. The staff crushed it. So three big time transfers coming in. Justin, we're going to talk depth charts, but what's your overall feel on the secondary to kind of kick this off? Just in terms of numbers, depth charts, specifically the transfers coming in.
Hands down, from an athletic talent and experience level, I'd say that this is the strongest cornerback room we have had probably since we've been the 3-4. I think. Do
you like this group better than the Nick Nelson?
I think it's deeper. I think it's more balanced. There's no weak spots. Like, I think you could make the argument that Nelson and Tyndall were stronger overall at those two spots. But you have a guy like Dort at the nickel spot, who I think is a plus guy at that spot too. I think it's probably the most athletic secondary we've ever had, dating back to probably Barry's days in the defensive backfield. There are some things here that point to this being. There are people who feel very highly about this defense heading into the season, and I think the pass defense is a big reason why. Because unlike most seasons where I think we got by a little bit on our pass rush, where it was guys held on for dear life and the pass rush saved them from potentially giving up some plays, I think this year they actually have the coverage guys to bail out the defense a little bit if they don't get there right away. So there'll be a couple of those plays where guys are sitting back looking for someone and no one's open, and we end up getting a sack because it's a coverage sack.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit. So depth charts came out. Alexander Smith, Jay Shaw listed as the two top corners. We're going to start at corners. We're going to do corners and safeties in this preview. So we're going to start at corners. Jay Shaw, the transfer from UCLA, and Alexander Smith, who has been battling a hammy the entire time, and we didn't really know if he was going to play week one. Those are your two starting cornerbacks. I think we feel fantastic about that duo. Jay Shaw was a second-team All-Pac-12, and Alexander Smith has blown the top off of everything from the coaching standpoint. So we feel really good about that. And then you have Dort in the nickelback. He was the Kentucky transfer, a fifth-year senior. Guys played a bunch. And you have Justin Clark backing him up, the sixth-year transfer from Toledo. This is a deep and experienced group of corners, man.
You have Ricardo Hallman, too, who they have said some really positive things about. And actually, I've really liked as a player coming in.
Samar Melvin in the 2 deep seems to be coming on as a junior. So I don't know where the weak spot is. Like Alexander Smith and Shaw are athletic. They're not small guys. They're both 5'11", 6 foot. Has tons of experience.
Yeah, Smith has a good frame for a corner for us. He's bigger than most of the guys that we've had out there.
Let me ask you this. I had this question internally, and I saved it. I didn't throw it out on any Twitter or any message board because I wanted to actually ping your brain on this. I kind of feel like I wouldn't play Alexander Smith week one against Illinois State, battling a hamstring.
I actually was going to make the point when you brought him up that he wasn't there. I'm like, it wouldn't shock me if we don't see play. Like, he's not on the injury report, but it wouldn't shock me if it's one of those things where it's like, he's not on the injury report. He could play if we had to, but we're not going to play him.
Or at least very limited, right? Maybe he plays a quarter. And listen, Illinois State's not going to keep this close. And if they do keep it close, then we're in for a whole world of trouble this year.
If he plays, it will be one of those things where they play him for a quarter, and if we get a lead, he's out.
Right. No, I would tend to agree because much like this is another kind of carryover from the quarterback thing, and I do not want to get Justin fired up on quarterbacks, but I did say, or we did talk about on the quarterback stuff, this is a great opportunity, Illinois State, to get Deacon some reps, right? You're going to need him in case something happens. This is also kind of a good opportunity if you look towards next year. All of these seniors are gone, right? You're losing 4 cornerbacks, seniors. This is a good opportunity to potentially get Melvin, Ricardo Hallman some reps, Max Loaf. Well, Melvin and I'll say Hallman.
If this game is played right, Wisconsin is up 42-3, 42-7 midway through the third quarter,
right?
And we're playing second stringers.
Agreed.
Like that's how this game should play out.
Yep. And quite frankly, if it doesn't,
and you're hoping Mertz is something like 17 of 24 for like 215 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like,
we're not getting you down the road of quarterbacks. Justin.
No, I'm just saying like that is the type of stat line you expect from a game like this.
Yes,
he's not going to go out there and throw for 300 yards. And I don't think that we're going to run the ball 50 times to start,
No, I agree. I think it's going to be balanced to start. Look, the other one I want to talk about, I'm going to veer you back to defensive backs. Your natural places to veer towards quarterbacks.
It's game week.
It is game week, and I am excited, man. Let's talk safeties. So we got Torchio's going to start. Hunter Wohler starting. So, Torchio's a senior, the veteran. Great story, by the way. Obviously the walk-on. Everybody knows that. Former walk-on from California. And then Hunter Wohler, the in-state 4-star. We never get that kid. What a dichotomy between these two, right? You have the unheralded 2-star nothing walking on from across the country. And then you have starting next to him, the blue chip.
First off, let's give him his credit. He was a 3-star.
Was he a 3-star?
With a Cal offer, yes.
He did. Okay. Listen, people always throw the Cal offer around like it carries football weight.
I hope the only reason I do is because of the coach.
Sure, it's still a Cal.
That's the only reason. I don't, as a program, no. As a coach there, as somebody who I believe in that knows defense.
That's fine.
I look at him and I'm like, that's a guy that can identify defense.
Listen, the last thing I'm trying to slight is the jewelry thief. But it is still a very interesting kind of 2 stories, right, to get into the backfield together. And
one is the pedigree and the other guy is
one's the in-state kid. The other one is from California. How good do you think that duo is, Torchio and Wohler?
I think that Torchio is he's your brain back there, and Wohler is your guy who will eventually be that, but he's your freak. I think they've made it sound like they're kind of interchangeable, which I think they probably will be used somewhat like that. But I do think that Wohler's going to spend a lot more time in the box out of the two of them. I actually think Torchio is a better athlete than people give him credit for.
I would agree with that.
Do I want him up, on a slot receiver from Ohio State? No, I don't. But there's not really any secondary in the country where you want a safety on a slot receiver from Ohio State. So,
or a corner.
Yeah.
Like let's just be real.
He is an above average athlete.
Yes.
For college football. And Wohler is a freak. So I think they're going to be very strong in the safety position.
You know what we miss though? We miss having a freak on the back end that can cover a ton of ground. Like I agree. Well, Torchio is a better athlete than people realize, right? He gets typecast just because of a lot of reasons.
He was a better athlete than who was the guy last year?
Nelson?
No, the other one. Nelson actually I always thought was a pretty good athlete. The one that had the injury.
The one that had the injury.
The Grit Factory guy.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
I'm so bad at this. I'm so bad with names. Came from Houston.
Oh no, we all know who exactly you're talking. Colin Wilder.
Yes,
Wilder.
Yeah. I thought Wilder wasn't
a great athlete.
Was not as good an athlete as what Torchio is. I think he's more agile. I think Wilder might have been a little bigger, but I think that Torchio is more agile and quicker. So I think you're just having a trade-off for a little range. Wohler, on the other hand,
though, Wohler is replacing Wilder, and really more. I think Torchio is more replacing Nelson.
Yeah, I would say that Wohler is the probably best athlete we've had back there since Jamerson.
Jamerson could fly. Yeah.
He's not that level of athlete.
Latrell could move.
But he's a guy. Nelson wasn't a bad athlete, and his combine day proved it. But there is motion that is direct, and I think a lot of the difference between Nelson and a guy like Wooler is it's instinctual. You have a guy who just is a heat-seeking missile to where the ball is, and Caputo had that. Now he didn't have great speed, but the second he was on something, he was downhill like a rocket coming at wherever the play was. And I think Wooler has some of that in him. Nelson was kind of more of I'm just kind of weaving my way over here kind of guy.
You reminded me of Nate Gary from Nebraska. Yeah. In the athletic measures will be there, but the results didn't always line up. Yeah. A few too many missed tackles.
But would bite on things that you didn't like.
Would bite on things. And make some nice plays too, like a good player. Certainly a good player. All right, we're coming up. We're going to talk best case, worst case. Hunter Wooler, by the way, one of my 2 or 3 favorite players I'm excited to see this year. Jordan Turner also in that mix. We're going to talk best case, worst case coming up on Locked On Badgers. I think there's a pretty big gap between the two of them. There's a bunch of new players, and that doesn't always work out well. So we'll see what happens there. But first, today's show is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting needs and information. Fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the number one online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league. That's right. BetOnline is not just a betting site. It is a sports mecca. Find the latest news and notes on basketball, football, baseball, golf, UFC, esports. It's all there. Plus online Vegas casino games at your favorite sports betting website. Tons of live betting and futures bets as well. We've talked about over-unders for a lot of Big Ten teams. I am sorry for everybody who thought taking that Nebraska over was intelligent. Listen, I was on that boat last year. Like, I was there. I learned my lesson. I was all over Northwestern plus 12 against Nebraska. That was an incredibly high line for me. So I've already used BetOnline. I've already gotten a good play off of it. It's about a lot of Locked On hosts use because it just has everything there, like we've talked about. A lot of great betting options. Grab your mobile device, head to the website to learn more about the trends and actions happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. I want to thank everyone again for making Locked On Badgers your first listen of the day. We are here for you every single day covering your team, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on the pod. We're going to get back into the defensive backs preview with Justin, doing a little best case, worst case. All right, Justin.
Where are we going first?
We're going worst case. We've been leading off with worst case because I like to get it out of the way. So and again, with worst case, try to avoid everybody gets hurt or the two.
No, and that's definitely not where I'm going to go with this. Wisconsin, I feel, has a surprisingly high floor for their worst case because I do feel very strongly that the front seven is actually going to be pretty darn good this year. The worst case is the defense gets charred completely on the back end against a team like Ohio State in week 4 and has a couple communication breakdowns against games where we can't afford to have it later in the season, where guys get free and it leads to big plays. And it could end up costing us a couple of games if that ends up playing out that way, if we have a couple of close ones, which potentially, if we don't know what the offense is yet, could very well happen. That we could have games like we had last year where, getting to 20 is a tough thing for the offense. I think that there's talent there. I think that if it is worst case, we will have very long periods of gameplay where things look really good, followed by some plays here and there where it's busted. And it's like, what the heck is going on? How can you look this good one moment and then the next moment this is happening?
Yeah. No, I think you nailed it, actually. I should have gone first. I feel like you stole my notes. I think that's it. I'm actually, even on a worst case basis, I'm really not worried about the corners. I think it's the worst case for me is the safeties get burned too much.
I feel pretty confident that any communication issues will be worked out by the time we get to Ohio State.
You know why I don't think there's a real, again, we're throwing injury out of this. There is so much experience at the cornerback spots. Mm-hmm. I just don't think they're going to, even Ohio State. Ohio State's not going to throw something at them that freaks them out. Now, Ohio State might just run by them because they run by everybody, right? Ohio State might just win 50-50 balls because they do that against everybody. But Jay Shaw, Alexander Smith, Dort, Justin Clark, these dudes they're they're all seniors for gosh sake. It's incredible. They're not going to get freaked out. Where the issue might be is you have a brand new starter in Hunter Wohler, right? Who, listen, he's going to make a lot of plays, but he also could give a couple up.
Yeah.
And I just think Torchio lacks a little bit. Like, I think Hunter Wohler's ideal running mate is like a Tanner McAvoy, like someone who's really rangy and can cover up for some of his mistakes. Right?
Ideally, it would have been Austin Brown having a year under his belt.
Or Austin Brown a year from now. Exactly. And I just wish Torchio was a little bigger, faster.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's probably every defensive coordinator wishes their free safety was a little bigger.
We're talking about what they could use, and everybody would have loved to have a 6'2" free safety that can run.
Yeah. So I think you nailed worst case. If something goes wrong that I could buy it into at the end of the year and say, yeah, that makes sense. I think it's the safeties getting roasted a little bit, especially early on. Let's talk best case. How good, if things realistically click here, how good could this secondary be?
If this is what I think is this defense is capable of, I think that this defense is every bit as good as last year's defense. But the trade-off is they'll be a little better against the pass, a little worse against the run. And I think that's likely to be the way that it plays out. And it might not, to be clear on this, I'm not talking strictly yardage. I'm looking at this and saying, hey, there may be plays where we give up a little bit in the passing game, but they're more dominant in terms of locking things up when they need to, which, to be fair, there were certain games where we struggled with that. Nebraska was a prime example last year. There were times where I was looking at it and I'm like, who is covering Torre? Because he's running free. And I don't see that happening with this defense. I think the mental capacity of the guys with the amount of reps that they have played, I feel very confident that the guys out there are going to be locked in. Yeah. I think there's really only one game that scares me with the secondary, and that's Ohio State. And I think they could very well, if they play to their optimum level, they could cause some problems for Ohio State. They don't have to hold on forever if the pass rush gets home. And I do think Wisconsin can pass rush Ohio State. This isn't Fields back there. So they have a guy that they can track down that I think that they feel they can get to.
You like this secondary better than last year's? I mean, it's just interesting to me because last year's secondary was pretty good. It wasn't great, but it was pretty good.
It lacked athletes. Here's the thing. Who was the kid from Texas?
Caesar Williams.
Caesar Williams.
Yep.
He was tall, he was lanky, he lacked speed, and he was not the most sudden guy. And the other guy was a little undersized. And I think that we're a little more balanced. I think both guys are a little bit more sudden. I think that they're bigger and more physical. And I think that really helps at the corner spot. And I think that Dort is a guy who has good size at the nickel spot.
Yeah.
So I think you're really positive in terms of what you've switched to there.
Yeah, shockingly, I think it's better too. And it's just amazing to me how we entered the offseason and there were so many questions about the secondary, right? Because I agree, Caesar Williams was a 4'6" guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
it was probably a mid 4'6". Like,
yeah,
he was
probably
not
4'6",
a super fast guy.
Now, he was a nice weapon to use against other teams' big receivers in the red zone. I mean, he made a couple big plays against Minnesota in his career in the red zone, but you couldn't isolate him on an island. Scott Nelson, this was always inconsistent. And to your point earlier, I think Wilder lacked a bit of an athleticism. Like, he's really probably more of a strictly in the box guy, quite frankly. I think you've improved athletically across the board, and I think your depth is better. So I think best case, man, you're looking at, I think you're right. I think the deepest group of cornerbacks, I think absolutely, maybe not safeties. I think absolutely the deepest group of cornerbacks.
Safety is the position I'm a little afraid for because I don't know what we have for depth there. So we really are relying. One of the stories to kind of keep an eye on is these first 3 games. They really need to get that second team out there, safeties, to get reps so that those guys can get some film on themselves and see some of the things that they need to work on. Because I feel pretty confident in the starters. If one of those guys goes down for whatever reason, it scares me because Zachman's only been a safety for a year.
Yeah.
And is it Latu?
Kamoy Latu.
He's only been in our system for a few months.
And Titus Toller is still knocking off rust. And Yep.
So when you have a guy that's barely been in the system, it's going to take him a little bit to get down the instincts in your system, like to know exactly where he has to go the second he sees something, to get that thinking out of the way. So those 3 games are going to be really important for those 2 guys.
For sure. And low key, like that week 2 matchup against Washington State, there's a lot of buzz about Cam Ward, the transfer quarterback they brought in. So listen, I don't think they're going to push us, but I do think early in that game, Cam Ward could create some interesting situations for our secondary.
I'm gonna give you my lead into that quick and just say this: Cam Ward's gonna be running for his life because I don't believe that offensive line is gonna hold up to our defense, and I really think Herbig's gonna be a big problem in that game.
Oh, he probably will. Like, listen, I expect us to beat them, but it's going to be a good early season test for being ready for Ohio State.
With a team with no running game. The problem is that you now have a pass rush that wants to pass rush that's just off the chain and ready to go, and Wisconsin has the depth at the outside linebacker position to keep cycling guys in who are fresh.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. Listen, we definitely talk more about Washington State before that game, but I think it'd be a good look for the secondary.
They'll see some different things that they're not used to seeing.
They're not playing just 3 patsies before Ohio State. I don't think you want 3 cupcakes.
Well, and it's a different offense than you normally catch in the Big Ten.
Right. I just think you want something a little challenging before Ohio State. Otherwise, it's like eating 3 cupcakes and then trying to eat a 128-ounce steak. Like, you need something in between those to get your stomach ready, right? All right, coming up next on Locked On Badgers, we are going to grade the secondary, finish up our positional previews. What do we think of this year's unit? I think you guys might have a clue, and then what do we think looking 2 or 3 years down the road? That's where it might get a little interesting. All that's coming up on Locked On Badgers. We're going to keep Justin here right after this. Thank you, everybody, for making Locked On Badgers one of your first listens every single day. Really, really do appreciate it. Finishing up positional previews with a really strong group of defensive backs. Justin, let's grade. Let's start with just this year. So not looking at any upside at anybody, the people who are ready to play right now. How would you grade this position?
I would say it's a B+. I would say it's if the depth was more seasoned at safety, I'd probably go A-.
Wow. That's bringing the fire.
I feel pretty good. Yeah.
That's a little too rich for me just because I don't fully trust, like you said, the depth at the safety spot. So I'm going to go a B. I think B+, you're right, bordering into almost elite great range. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think the Torchio Wohler duo will be that this year. I think in a couple years, to your point earlier, maybe that Brown-Wohler combo could be that, but I just think we lack the true center fielder. And here's the other thing. I didn't talk about this on Worst Case. There's a ton of new voices in this room, and it might take a little bit to gel, even at the experienced cornerback spot. So I'm going to say a B, which is still an above average grade, certainly one of the better units in the conference. That's where I'm going to go this year. Let's look down the pike 2 or 3 years, take into account coaching, how we recruit the positions, and the young players on the team. How would you grade our secondary 2 or 3 years down the pike?
I would say, looking at it right now, I would say it's a C, and I'll say it this way. Wisconsin is not hitting on a bunch of guys that are known quantities at the cornerback position. They're hitting on good athletes for the most part. Same with some of their safety guys. They're not hitting on guys who are, top 250 guys in the class. I really like Brown. I think him and Wohler are going to be very good players. Mm-hmm. Now, what we have behind them, I am not totally sold on. I think there's athleticism there, a lot of it, but we need to see it. Like, if these guys click, they could be excellent at the safety position. I really like some of the athletes they have at that spot. Same with cornerback. If some of these guys really hit, they could end up being really good corners. If they don't, they're guys who are going to be solid, but probably lack some of the upside that you like to see up against better receivers.
Yeah, we're kind of disagreeing in this segment. I like it. I'm higher on the long term right now than you are. I'm going to give it also a B. And just let's look at a couple of young players on the roster. You and I love Cade Yakimelli. We're both Yakimelli fans, right? To me, that's And like you said, we don't know, but that's kind of what looking down the pike is. Like, we're not going to really know with any of these guys.
Well, from
But
an athleticism grade, I'd give them they're B to B plus because
So
I really like the athletes that we have at both spots.
And I think he's a football dude. He's a football player. I really believe wherever you put Yakimelli, after listening to his coach talk, after seeing all the positions he played in high school, winning a state title, being one of the leaders on that team, I think at safety he's going to be great. And then you have Wooler and Austin Brown, two highly recruited players. And then at the Zachman's in there. And then at the cornerback spots, like Ayvonne Jones has drawn a ton of praise.
Yeah, Ricardo Hallman.
When we had John Garcia, the Sports Illustrated recruiting director, on, I asked him, who's your one player from last year's class that is the most underrated? And he said, it's Ayvonne Jones. He said, that dude is a total player. Should have been a 3 or 4 star cornerback. And that's another guy, Evan Flood, has talked about how much he likes Ayvonne Jones. So in this cycle, we picked up Jace Arnold, who I think brings a little different level of quickness and speed. He's smaller, but he's another athletic guy. We both like the athletic upside of Al Ashford, wherever he ends up fitting in.
That's the problem. I want to know what they're going to do with that guy.
I do too.
I feel like you can't waste that type of frame.
I wish they would leave that corner and just let him develop.
Exactly.
But either way, like, I really like the young bodies they put here. And then I trust I don't think we have a great feel for Hank Poteet, the coach, yet, but I trust Jim Leonard, the coach. So I'm going to say a B for the looking down the pike here.
I will say this. I thought that last year was a noticeable upgrade in what we saw from the cornerbacks to prior years. So I do think Poteet does offer quite a bit there. And I think it definitely helps give Leonard the ability to focus more on what he actually wants the safeties to do. So I think that was a very positive move.
Why do you hate our future cornerbacks, Justin?
I don't. I love the athleticism. I see the issue I have is that none of these guys are truly in the 2 deep. And because of that, it's like.
But they did bring in 3 veteran transfers.
They did. They did. But the issue is that we may not see these guys on the field getting reps. So they're going to get somewhat stunted by that, which is where you're kind of looking that year ahead. And it's like, well, these guys in a normal season, you'd have guys like Hallman and Smith, who would probably be your starters, who are going to be seasoned. But Hallman would be effectively taking over as your number 1 next year. And somebody else would be coming along the ride with him that, like somebody like Jones, probably would have played this year and gotten reps. He might not have that happen now. And because of that, you're looking at it and saying, next year's the year they start to get their feet wet. And one thing I will say is this. Leonard defenses, corners are never bad. They're not necessarily great, but they're never bad.
Yeah, not agree. All right. I think that about hits the defensive backs, man. Thank you so much for helping me with this one and doing the quarterbacks as well, and everything else you do for the show, man, as we build up this community. You're definitely one of the best people we have on here and keeps everybody smarter. And we are like 5 days away, man, from the season. We are like, I think 5 or 6 days, depending on when you're listening to the people tuning into this, depending on when you listen to it, we are almost there. So the rest of the season is all game week. We got the positional previews knocked out, a lot of fun. And now we're going to do an Illinois State preview. We're going to do keys to the game. I'm going to try to get an Illinois State writer on so we can chop it up with him. John Garcia will be on this week to talk about week 1 visitors. Definitely some interesting names popping up there. So stick with us on Wisconsin, and we're going to keep talking. It's finally game week, y'all. So let's keep building the community. Thank goodness the long, dead, dry period of no football is over.
Yep.
All right, guys. Thank you, Justin, and we'll talk tomorrow.
Later, man.